Good evening and welcome to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast with you as always from the NFL Network, NFL.com. Jeff Chadiha for Pro Football Focus from the Lair. It's Eric Eager. I like the lighting approach there. It's kind of a mood lighting type of thing that's going on.
Sophisticated.
Yeah.
It's something.
Yeah.
Very
Amityville. I haven't put my ring light back. We had people visiting for my sister's wedding, and somebody stayed here. And so, honest to God, the ring light has not been put back on. I do have this camera, but it does not work with what's it stream? You know, this particular streaming service. So, yeah, you get my Jean-Michel Basquiat shirt though.
Based on how you picked it up, it sounds like your microphone is in that camera. You might put the camera closer to you because you got louder when you held it up near you.
Hello.
No, that's not the mic you're on. You're not on that mic. You're on a different mic in there somewhere.
Oh Lordy! All right.
That might be the same light you had when you were a kid in that room. I'm guessing.
Probably.
Anybody in the comments, which if you're catching us via the podcast later on, you can comment when we're live. It is via the Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. Let me know if Eric's too low or something. I'll bring him up because of the audio. I can control it a little bit here. So let me know if Eager's too low or someone's too loud. It's a little bit hard to do it all at once. So we'll take your tips. You can hit us up in the comment section here in the chat room. We got a lot to get to as the Chiefs are on the eve of training camp. So let's dive right into it, Jeff. Orlando Brown, it's the biggest subject going. You were on NFL Network talking about it recently. Now it's time to talk about distractions. He's not going to show up. I don't think anybody feels like he's going to show up. Yeah. What level of a distraction do you think he's actually going to be?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd put it at a 4 for right now. I think early on, this team will be dialed in. Andy Reid does a great job of getting this team going in training camp. He runs a pretty efficient training camp. You got a veteran quarterback who's obviously very accomplished, very talented. I think he'll have this team, this offense going in the right direction. That stuff doesn't affect the defense as much. The defense, Spagnuolo, rookies, all that stuff, it's a whole different story. I think as far as the offense, having Mahomes, having an offensive line that's been together, at least the bulk of it for a year now with Joe Thuney and Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey, those guys. I think that, look, we'll talk about it. We won't be able to see what it means until they're actually playing preseason games and seeing the effect it has on the actual offensive line. But I think the first couple of weeks, it'll be discussed, when the veterans report. But after that, there'll be a lull. And then when we get closer to the season, yeah, that's when it'll go from being a 4 or a 5 to being an 8 or a 9.
What's your opinion, Eric? When does this, if at all, become a distraction for this football team?
I think that this is a team that's sort of like in the middle of transitioning from, the first few Super Bowls, right? Like, and they won one, to this sort of more mature kind of, I hate to say this, but like Patriot way sort of thing.
No.
And I don't think that it becomes a distraction at all. Like, I think that this team is like sort of laser focused on being, winning 5 of the next 10 Super Bowls. Whether that is even possible or not, it is beyond, the story. But like, I don't think it becomes a distraction. I think that, if it was, I think that all the distraction happened this offseason when you didn't have an agent, he didn't come to OTAs or mini camps. He, he was more interested in going to Mahomes' wedding. Everyone wants to click that check in the bingo squares. And, as opposed to, right now, it's like, I think the die has already been cast. I think everybody in Orlando Brown's position with the Chiefs would probably wait until a week or two before the season to show up. And I think everybody understands that.
Yeah, I think, to me, is it a distraction? I think it is, because it gets to one of our other topics. I mean, it becomes a distraction when guys have to play another position. I know they want every offensive lineman to play everywhere and have flexibility and have versatility, but somebody's got to line up with the ones. And I think the question will be, does Joe Thuney say, and I think this is where his teammates got to have an idea of when he's coming in, be able to say, Coach, listen, he's going to be here by when we get here. And then if you're Andy Reid, can you buy that? Right? Because what do you want to do? Do you want to practice and just throw one of the backup left tackles in there? Say, okay, we're going to get reps for this guy. We're going to try to get, Garen Christian better, right? We're going to try to make him a better player. Or do you say, Joe, it's time to get that kick step really working, man. Joe Thuney, you're moving out the left tackle. That's the distraction part of the whole equation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's important to separate the contract negotiation, what Orlando Brown Jr. was worth, and his value to this team. I mean, he does have value as a player. He is playing a spot that they don't have a ton of depth at. It's really the only spot on the offensive line where you're saying if they have to play a backup there, it is going to have a great impact on everybody else on that offensive line. So from that standpoint, that there is a bit of a distraction there because they don't know. It's great to think about Joe Thuney and what he did in the Bengals game. That's one game. Look, to have to do that over the course of an entire season, if he could do that, trust me, he'd be playing left tackle his entire career. So that's not a great fix. And I don't expect Orlando Brown to sit out the entire season. If this comes to that, that would be a huge surprise and a major disappointment. But I do believe that the Chiefs have to be concerned about, one, what kind of shape he'll be in if he does miss all of training camp, when he'll be ready to play, and what their game plan is if he can't be out there and be effective in week one.
I agree with that. And like I said, that's why I say it definitely is a distraction, right? Like it's, when you're having to move guys around, and if he's going to be back, this is why coaches, get upset, is because they don't have what they're going to actually play. No. Right now, they'll try to spin it as, well, so-and-so got a lot of reps over there, and, he was ready when we had to step in, or if somebody has to step in at right tackle, they'll say, well, this is actually a positive because he was able to go, take care of this or handle that. That's how they'll spin it. But right now, Andy Reid wants to get ready, right? Like he's, as much as they're installing things for the whole year, he's also getting ready for week one. And he can't really do it if Orlando Brown's going to come in 2 weeks before. And I think that's been your point, Eric, is that like, unless he comes in a reasonable amount of time, Andy Reid's going to be like, no, we've prepped for this, and we'll start prepping for you. But like, what time does week one go by the wayside if you're Andy Reid thinking he's going to play left tackle?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be at least 2 weeks before the start of the regular season, which is probably a tall ask, right? If he's going to sit out the majority of the preseason, then that's not really a feasible thing. Week one, they have J.J. Watt and they have Marcus Golden of the Arizona Cardinals. I feel like that is probably an okay time to sort of ease him back in and get him some reps and stuff. But I'd be surprised, like if he sat out all of training camp, I'd be surprised if he started that game. I'd be surprised if he started week one.
Yeah, I would too. Some of the comments we've got, that are out there. And this one, I think the team made it more of a distraction with their comments. I think that's alluding to your report, Jeff, about where things were. This one from Quinn, by the way, if you're catching us via the podcast, you can be part of the conversation, as I said, in the stream on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. Quinn says, love how everyone's suggesting Jeff just made up his report, yet this podcast was the only outlet to suggest anything about them trading Tyreek Hill all the way back in October. I think the thing, because we've heard similar rumblings to what Jeff was talking about, and I think a little bit of that, the reaction from it is getting a bit overblown. Like, it's being taken. I heard some conversations today where people are like, well, the Chiefs have got to stop doing. The Chiefs have said nothing publicly.
Yeah.
Jeff reported something, right? Brett Veach didn't go, let me make this clear. Here's how it is, and here's what's going to happen, right? That's not what happened. Andy Reid didn't step out and say, this is what's, it's not where I think it's clear. They knew they had. Can we all agree on this? They knew they had the franchise tag to slap on the guy.
No.
I think they felt like there was obviously conversation between them and Orlando Brown, probably not his agent if he had one at that time. He's probably on the outs with Orlando Brown. But they came away after conversations with Orlando Brown that, hey, we'll play it left tackle and we'll get a reasonable price. And he's like, yeah, I'm not looking to crush it. And I mean, I think it's fair to say that, their point is just like, this isn't where we thought we'd be. But it's okay. We have the tag. Now it's on Orlando Brown. Does he not play, which I think would be a negative thing, which we've talked about, because they hold the hammer for 2 years. And he's got to play and play well. I think it's actually a great move. I think, the Chiefs have went out of their way to even make an offer. I personally think the best move for the Chiefs, and maybe this is what they were doing all along, would be to make no offer and make him prove it again. Play a second year at a high level for $16.7 million. It's a little more than we'd have to count against the cap this year, but it just gives us the opportunity to be really cheap with you the following year if we backload the deal. But it buys us some more security about what you are. So I don't think the Chiefs are upset right now. And I think, frankly, they're rooting for Orlando Brown to have a great year. I think this shows the difference between what I hear, and I think it's lazy journalism. And a lot of people have said it, and I've had arguments on my show. Well, the Chiefs have to sign him. They traded for him. They have to sign him. That's just lazy. They don't. They proved they don't. They made the right move. They're happy to give him more than Trent Williams. Just play better than Trent Williams, and they'll be happy to give you more than Trent Williams. But you haven't played better. Now he gets that opportunity to do it.
Yeah, and there's always been a disconnect from day one with Orlando Brown being on this team, because the Chiefs, from my perspective, they see him as a cog in the machine and less of a unique individual talent. He sees himself as a player who's playing a position where he should get paid a lot of money, but he's not seeing it as I have to perform at a high level at that position to get the money. And so that's kind of where this gap is in this negotiation they just had, because I think what the Chiefs offered is completely fair. And whether you want to call it team friendly or reasonable, whatever, they've made a statement about how they feel about Orlando Brown Jr., which is to say, we like you, we like what you bring to this team, but we don't think you're a great player. But we'll pay you what we think a good player should get paid, which is fine. Now, the question, as you just said, is what is Orlando Brown willing to do to find out what his ultimate value really is? And sometimes we've seen this before, players, when they get out there and have to actually find that out, it's a tough lesson to learn. I mean, he probably has a hard time remembering when he was up for a trade with the Ravens, nobody aside from the Chiefs was jumping at him. Unfortunately, not having an agent, having an agent who's not that experienced creates this. But I certainly, by no means, and I know sometimes people can take it the wrong way when they hear frustrated or disappointed. I think the Chiefs would have loved to have signed Orlando Brown Jr. and have him set up here. The key is they're not going to pay him crazy money to do that.
And Eric, let's be clear. We've heard this one little thing that Jeff reported from the Chiefs. How much did we hear from the agent? Obviously, we don't know for sure, but the reports that were out there about, we want a real contract, not just some fake numbers, and we're looking for security beyond just 2 years. And listen, the market was flooded with stuff from the Orlando Brown side of the equation. So the idea that the Chiefs are creating, and listen, I'm all for getting on the Chiefs when they need to be got on. We've gotten on Andy Reid for when he chastised a media member, a friend of mine, a coworker, Todd Lebo, for asking a legitimate question. We got no problem jumping the Chiefs when they need to be jumped. And it's frankly, it's low hanging fruit. It's usually the easy thing to do in the media business. But there's no need for it here. The overwhelming amount of verbiage has come from the Orlando Brown side. And basically the Chiefs publicly have officially said nothing, right? Like, so I don't think the Chiefs are blown away. And I don't think they're shocked that they're sitting in this position. Let's be clear. Would they like him in camp? Yes. But Eric, do you think practice is going to, well, that's it? We forfeit? That's what I always say to people. You have to sign him. So if they don't, do they forfeit? Or if he gets hurt, is that it? Everybody goes home? Like, come on, people.
Well, I think the big thing for me is when they talk about like Orlando Brown not necessarily meeting expectations, right? That's basically what Jeff's quote was. What I think they mean is not necessarily on the field, where I think he wasn't as good in 2021 as he was with the Ravens in 2020. That contributes to it. But there's this lack of like understanding of where the Chiefs are, right? Last year, when they traded for Orlando Brown, it was about turning the clock forward 12 months and making sure that, they had 4 problems to solve on the offensive line, right? Like they had left guard was the only position that where there was no where they had a proven starter. So you put Orlando Brown at left tackle, and it gave you some stability to solve the other three problems in the offensive line. And to the Chiefs' credit, they solved two of the three at least in Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. For Orlando Brown not to understand that part is a big deal. Also, we're talking about Orlando Brown's representation. Orlando Brown's representation is like 6 weeks old, right? Prior to that, Orlando Brown was doing his own thing.
Yep.
And for much of the offseason, the guy felt like being Patrick Mahomes' buddy was better preparation for the season than getting his damn contract figured out, right? Why did they even have to go to the franchise tag? If he understood the situation more, like if he had an agent and understood the situation better, you're telling me that the deal that they offered him, which was $18 million APY for 4 years, $50 million guaranteed, which, by the way, folks, that was more guaranteed money than Trent Williams got last year from the San Francisco 49ers. Yep. And Trent Williams is twice the player Orlando Brown is.
I think
I think where the Chiefs are probably understandably upset is not that they expected him to play ball so much, like when they traded for him. It's more that I think they expected there to be a rational response to the situation at the trade, after the trade, and now we're sitting here a year after the trade. And Orlando Brown's camp, frankly, they had the same answer to a question that kept evolving.
They thought they were going to deal with adults, right, Jeff? And that's
exactly. Yes.
And I'm not
thinking different languages,
or at least an experienced negotiator. And not a guy that, let's be honest, I had a conversation with a guy in the league. I said, let me get your view of what's going on in Kansas City. And he's in the contract world. And I said, tell me if I got this right on your view. If this was your team and you were dealing with this, I said, you got a guy who I was told this, I haven't looked it up. And so I apologize. This is, but people I trust have looked this up. He was doing D2 or D3 hockey player contracts. Like that's what the guy was
agent,
doing.
Orlando Brown.
Yeah, that's what the guy was doing. He has no experience with how the NFL works. And I think that's where the Chiefs did it. I have no idea what their conversations were, but I think they thought, look, there's a process to this. There's a normalcy to it. Let's deal with it. I want to be clear. I think the part that is misunderstood here is where each side is coming from. I think everybody is viewing this negotiation as he's an unrestricted free agent.
Yep.
And the Chiefs are trying to lowball him when there's this massive market for him. Let's be clear. There is no market whatsoever for Orlando Brown because he can't get there unless the Chiefs cut him. And they're not going to let him get there. The market is not Trent Williams a year ago when the Chiefs looked at him and drove the price of him up on the 49ers when he was on the open market and could sign and go anywhere. He is currently sitting on a 2-year contract or a series of 2 one-year contracts renewed at the Kansas City Chiefs option at $16.7 and $20 million. This is the exact situation that he's in. He's on a 2-year contract renewed only at the Chiefs' whim. Both now this year, they can pull it at any time until he signs it, so they can yank it. Once he signs it, it's a 1-year, $16.7 million deal with a club option for what will be most likely right at about $20 million. So he's got 2 years. He's got a 1-year, $16.7 million deal. The Chiefs own him 2 years for $37 million, own his rights for 2 years, $37 million. And they don't have to negotiate in any other way. So when the agent goes, well, we're looking for something with more than 2 years security. Well, why would you give it? You're 2 years away from getting out there. So that's great that you're looking for it. I'm looking for a 20-year contract. I'm not getting it. My company doesn't have to give it to me. No one else is offering an 18-year contract. Why would they give me a 20-year contract? No one can even offer this guy a contract. And I think that's the problem is, the lens, and it's why, and I thank you for the kind words. I think we do give a lot of insight on this podcast. We're telling you what reality is. He holds no cards. And I think that's the frustration for the Chiefs is that's why it's not an adult conversation in the NFL world. They're dealing with a preschooler and contract negotiations.
There is an edge to breaking social norms, right? there is an edge to breaking social norms. We see that in politics. We see that in Belichick. We say like, hey, you can't line up Shane Vereen at tackle. Oh, you think I can't? Right? Yeah. There is an edge in when the rest of the league is like, well, you traded a first-round pick. By the way, it wasn't a full first-round pick.
Right.
When you trade a first-round pick for a tackle, your hands are tied. Who says so? Like
everybody except the Chiefs and the three of us sitting right here.
Yeah. Right? There is a edge to breaking social norms. And, we look at the Rams, right? Like the Rams, like you can't mortgage your future. You can't do this, this, and this. And the Rams are like, well, like who said you have to have a first round pick every decade, and they win a Super Bowl. Like, I think that there is, and I think Orlando Brown, and there's probably some stuff to this, right? Like Orlando Brown's a guy whose dad played in the league, right? Orlando Brown's a guy who's been in the league for a little bit, and probably used to those, like, those rules of thumb. And, I think if Orlando Brown has an agent for the last couple of years who can, frankly, work with PFF and work with the Chiefs and hammer this thing home, I guarantee you the Chiefs would have come up to 20 million APY over the first 4 years. Like the fact that they took their ball and went home, like that's part of not knowing what's going on. And good on Kansas City, good on Brett Veach, good on, Brant Tillis and the folks that, do the contracts. Like good on them for not caving because there's some unwritten rule somewhere that tells them they have to do something.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for weeks on this show, just how important it is the Chiefs are mature about handling these kinds of negotiations now. Just because if you want to be a player for a long time with the quarterback you have competing for championships, you got to make some tough decisions. Not everything you do should be built around desperation or built around, if we don't make this happen, we're not going to be able to compete or get where we want to get this year. I think we're all aware of where this team was after they lost to the Bucs in the Super Bowl and how desperate they were to fix that offensive line. As you said, Eric, those are the kind of things an agent would tell Orlando Brown Jr. He would also tell him, look, this team was just negotiating with Trent Williams, the highest paid left tackle in the game, a year ago, an offseason ago. And so if you think you're as good as he is, let's put your resume to where he is, and let's see how that stacks up. Let's put your resume against David Bakhtiari's and see where you stack up. Not to knock you, man, but Ronnie Stanley, who you play with in Baltimore, is getting paid $19.75 million average salary a year. He's the fourth highest paid left tackle in the game. He's a pretty good left tackle. If you're in that range, you're talking about 18 to 20 million, you're doing pretty well. But again, as Soren said, when you get so consumed with, I got to have that number be the biggest number in the game without really having earned it, right, it makes people not respect you as much. Not just in the organization, but your own teammates.
It's as simple as this. Ask yourself, is he as good as Trent Williams? No. Then why would he ask for more than that? I mean,
it's
like, are you as good as Michael Jordan? No. Why are you asking for Jordan money? I mean, that's reason enough for the Chiefs to be like, I'm not sure where we're coming from on this. Right? It's as simple as that. This is being made a lot more complex. Listen, it's the dead time of sports. There's nothing to talk about. There's no games going on. Baseball's waning for half of the baseball league, certainly in the town that the Chiefs play in. It's been an afterthought for 2 months. And so people need things to talk about. And this is being thrown up as a bigger deal than it is. When does he come in? Let's take a shot at that. Eric, you've kind of been on record. I'm curious if you've changed. You kind of think he comes in, what, a week before, 2 weeks before, but ends up missing the first game.
Yeah, I don't have any information here, obviously, but I just think it's if you're going to hold out, you either hold out for all of training camp or you don't hold out at all, because, I mean, there's, especially for a man of Orlando Brown's shape, like it's probably necessary for him to come in and actually, I don't think he can half-ass training camp. So, yeah, I mean, I think the most likely thing is he sits out most of training camp and maybe the first and comes back for the first game, but maybe he's inactive, but he gets a game check, of course. Or the second most likely thing is he comes in on day one. He doesn't hold out at all. A partial holdout be weird because they can't really resolve anything, right? It's not like they can give him. They can't. It's not like Emmitt Smith with Dallas in '93 where they can give him a contract. It's going to be one or the other, I think.
Obviously, he hasn't come out and stated, or his agent, or Jamal Brown, the former NFL left tackle, who's his mentor, has come out and said what he plans on doing. If you're going to hold out, you got to make them pay in some way for this. So they have to feel your absence. If you're just not there for practice, it doesn't make a difference. And if you want to miss practice, then that's probably going to affect your conditioning. It's probably going to affect, as Eric said, at your size, the potential to get hurt down the road and obviously compromise your ability to make money next season. So, I would expect that if he's going to not show up for training camp, there's a pretty good chance he's not playing in week one. Whether he's showing up for it or he shows up that week and doesn't end up playing, I just don't think he's going to be out there when this team opens the season.
Yeah, I think he will. I think he'll make it in. I think he comes in sooner than people think. Late. And the question will be, will the Chiefs, make an example of it? I think he'll come in because I think the reality is going to start to settle in of what he's done. Unless the agent said, look, we have no leverage. I'm going to make some noise. I'm going to try to get the court of public opinion on your side, but you're going to have to play for the tag. This is our plan. You can sit out some camp, but what do we really need to get you physically ready to play? 3 weeks, 4 weeks, what is it? Okay, that's the day we go in. You get in, you come in great shape, and you got to kick ass. Are you going to bet on yourself? Yeah, I'm going to bet on myself. Okay, you go play and have a great year. Next year, 1 year out, coming off a great season, and I've got some leverage, and I can force a trade. I can put some heat on them. They'll want to sign you. If he didn't say this is my plan, if things haven't gone exactly as the agent has said, and maybe the agent's a very bright guy and has studied the NFL and NFL negotiations intently, and he's got a good plan. But the plan has to include Orlando Brown being ready to play 17 games and play them well. And, I think Orlando Brown's a bright guy, but I don't think he's splitting atoms. I think some of his stuff you can clearly see through. I think he in some ways he either buys his own crap too much or he thinks he's a little smarter than he is. It's about money, right? Like the whole my dad and left tackle and an homage to my dad. And you want to get paid. I mean, here we sit. You're playing left tackle. Why would you not show up? This is what you wanted to do. Do
you think that the fact that he's on the tag though help? So right now, NFL players who are under contract cannot hold out without significant and stiff fines. Orlando Brown is part of a select subset of players who can hold out without stiff fines, right? Yeah. Do you think that factors into it at all, where the Players Association or fellow players are saying, look, you're one of the last cohorts of players who can stick it to a team who are not treating you fairly? Yeah. Now, I think maybe a lot of players are like, look, Orlando, you kind of suck. So take this. But I don't think Orlando Brown sucks. I just think he's not Trent Williams.
Solid.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I think he's a fine left tackle, but it's like starting pitching in baseball. The price gets driven up so fast. That's the one thing that scares me off of what you said, Petro, which is, it's got to hurt a little bit for the team. I agree with that, and I think there's going to be maybe a little pressure from maybe other agents. Although again, I don't know if this agent has acted weirdly and ruined it for other agents. Who knows? But I do think this is the holdout is one tool that's been largely taken away from players that Orlando Brown has in his tool shed, and maybe folks will encourage him to exercise it.
I mean, the one thing I was going to not jump on you, Soren, but I do wonder what happens after this season. You mentioned they'll come back, he's playing to prove himself. I just don't see where he's going to be with this team after this season. I think if they had an opportunity to sign him to a long-term deal when they traded for him, had an opportunity to sign him to a long-term deal this past offseason, and now you're talking about going into next offseason thinking about franchising him again, even though you have that tool. I just don't see where his head's going to be in the right place. I look at the guys last year who were franchised. The top 10 players, probably the top 10 guys who are franchise, 7 of those are on different teams now. I just think this is it for Orlando Brown Jr. And if he's smart, he plays the best he can and finds the best deal after that.
Yes.
But I don't know if the Chiefs are hungry to say, all right, I don't think he's going to play better.
And let's keep in mind, the Chiefs paid, when you push all the picks around, what the trade charts, their trade chart anyway, says is a mid-second rounder for him. And if he plays well and he walks, they get a third for him.
Yeah.
So you got 2 years of competent left tackle play, and what you gave up was you traded a second for a third.
Like $20 million too. Like
yeah.
10 million
and
per year-ish. Like
and you it ends up being a great deal. So everyone they're not gonna have anything to show for them. They will. First of all, let's be clear about what they gave when you take all the picks going back and forth and what it was. So that empowers them to go ahead and let him walk. And I think you're right. And Jeff, let's go back. What we talked about at the time of this trade, I wouldn't have done it. Jeff, you were adamant, like, hey, no, bad move. And Eric, your point all along was, you said, listen, there's really no good ending to this. Like we actually it actually threaded a needle. If he plays great, he's too expensive to sign him, and you don't want to pay him. If he plays like crap, you don't want to pay him, and you let him walk, and you have nothing to show for him, and he doesn't qualify for the higher draft pick, right? Instead, he played pretty good, right? He got the Pro Bowl nod, which helped, even though I don't know that he deserved it, but Ronnie Stanley being hurt again helped. But at the end of the day, it was kind of, he managed to stay in a lane that put them where they are. If he plays great, I agree. Either the Chiefs are happy to give him Trent Williams money, or he plays okay and he wants his way out of town and he threatens a holdout. And I think the Chiefs take whatever they can get for him in a trade, but it'll have to be more than a third-round pick, or they let him walk. And so I don't think that's the other thing. This idea that they're in a bad position is a misrepresentation of where they sit.
They also have an extra year now to find who their left tackle is going to be in the case of Orlando Brown not being. Like, I think the big thing that folks, and there were plenty of them on Twitter and plenty of them in the sort of Kansas City Chief intelligentsia that was like, hey, they're stuck. He's their only option at left tackle, which, again, he's their best option at left tackle. He's not their only one. A year from now, he might not even be their best option. Like, what if this kid from Kentucky's good, or what if Lucas Niang can play left tackle? What if, all these things, like, they'll be more open because, again, they're solving a different question than they solved last year at this time. And that's
the money to be active in free agency.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and they also have outs. Like Brett. So last year, 2 years ago, the Chiefs were under $1 million under the cap, right? And they needed things to go well. And then what happened? Eric Fisher gets hurt, Mitchell Schwartz gets hurt, and then last year they're still not that great with the cap, right? So they got to trade for Orlando Brown. And one of the things about trading for Orlando Brown that was important for all of us to understand is he was inexpensive on last year's salary cap, right? That was one of the reasons they traded draft capital for salary cap space in effect. And so you get to this year, and look, it is a trust fall season for the Chiefs, right? They said, if we trade one of our best players, what's going to happen? Well, the sky didn't fall, right? If we got 12 draft picks, we turn into 10, but it's still 10 draft picks. Oh my gosh, this looks pretty good. We like all of our draft picks. What if we don't extend Orlando Brown? What happens? And the sun came up the other day. It was crazy. Saturday morning, the sun came up. And again, this is a big offseason for the Chiefs and sort of testing what it would be like to be a mature Super Bowl caliber team. And I'm going to tell you what, Bill Belichick was not giving Trent Brown top of left tackle money. And the Vegas Raiders were pretty pissed off they did. And I think that is, the Chiefs have you don't just turn that way overnight. You need some of these affirmations to come through. And I think this Orlando Brown thing, it's going to be fine. And now they can, again, now that they know that they can exercise this restraint, they can say, well, look, in the future, we've already proven to ourselves we can exercise this restraint. Now let's plan for the left tackle position under those, and we'll be fine. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree. What is the best option? at left tackle, and I'll take first stab at this because I've been giving it some thought because I've kind of changed. It's always been just throw Joe Thuney out there. But if he's coming back, if he's going to come in, is it better to give Garen Christian a shot? And let's see, a guy who doesn't grade particularly well. No, but he is stronger on the pass block than the run block. Is it better to put him in there? Is it better to take a shot and say, okay, we think he can play right, but we're going to take Darian Kennard. We're going to throw him out there and leave everybody else where they are and just help the one guy at left tackle? Or is it better to move 2 spots and get your left guard out to left tackle and say he's our best guy? We can do pretty good at left guard with Nick Allegretti, and let's move him out there. What do you think the best plan is for him, for the Chiefs if he's not there while he's not there? It doesn't depend on how long he's out, Jeff.
I like what you said. I think you give Christian a shot to see what he can do. I mean, I think Andy Heck has proven to be a really good offensive line coach, been able to mix and match players, been able to overcome setbacks and challenges. I'd like to see what he can do because ultimately, I think the strength of your offensive line you want to keep as a strength. I don't think you have to have dominant edges at this stage just because left tackle and right tackle are where you're going to see your pass rushers. I think you can scheme around that a little bit and figure out what you have to work with and see if this, at some point, you're going to have a backup left tackle anyway, right? You're going to have to somebody you trust to do that. So I would prefer having Thuney be an emergency option, what he was in that Bengals game, and seeing what you have. Ultimately, look, I remember being in Denver's training camp in 2015, the year they won the Super Bowl. And there was all this talk about their offensive line. Probably nobody in this panel right now could even name who their starting offensive linemen were that season. I remember talking to Greg Knapp, a good friend of mine, since passed, who was their offensive coordinator. And I said, man, there's an old quarterback back there. He's Hall of Famer. Like, you got some average guys in front of him. What are you going to do? He's like, you know what? When Peyton Manning's your quarterback, doesn't matter that much because the ball's coming out fast. Only got black for a couple seconds. That's where they have to get to with Patrick Mahomes. Ball's got to come out faster. He's got to be more on time. That will help a lot with this conversation we're having.
And that's where these receivers, bigger receivers, to run some quicker slants, you have bigger catch radius to just pitch and catch it down the field a little bit. Maybe even use the running back, would be something he can use. You got your favorite, Eric, and where you're going at left tackle while he's out?
Yeah, I mean, somebody brought this up in the chat. Pristega Wangu is another one who, has a shot there. Garen Christian, as you guys said, hasn't done well. But, let's be honest, Eric Fisher didn't start doing well until the Chiefs, Alex Smith started, feeling himself, in that offense. Pat was obviously great for Eric Fisher. I mean, you guys remember that game against the Saints in 2020 where, when Mitch was out and Fisher was, coming back from injury and he struggled. I mean, Eric, this team has done fine with left tackle play that wasn't exactly like Ron Yeri. So I think that, they'll be okay there.
Who's that?
What's that?
Ron Yeri.
Yeah, Ron Yeri's a good.
Yeah, I know who he is. Yeah,
I'm in Minnesota now. I feel like I have to say his name. So I think I agree with Jeff. I think you need to have a backup left tackle that's not Joe Thuney at some point in this world, right? And you maybe take the time to develop that player in camp. And I think the median outcome is that you find out that he's good enough to be your backup left tackle, or you don't, right? And he ends up being bad, and you move on to a different. You likely will find one player who's probably good enough to play for you in a pinch. And that's great. And then if that player you want to go into week 1 with, sure. If that's a complete disaster, then you go with Joe Thuney. If Orlando Brown comes back and he's actually in shape, then you go with Orlando Brown. I think, but it's those guys. Kennard's a guy. Some people are saying Trey Smith. I probably wouldn't want to do that. Kennard's again probably more of a right tackle type player. But you can get. I mean, and the other thing is. This is Patrick Mahomes. When Patrick Mahomes signed the 10-year deal worth $500 million, he was signing up for you cover up for stuff. You're the quarterback. You're the superstar on this team.
First world problems.
Whether he knew it or not, this is a cover-up, right? This is what he had to cover up with. And I think that's got to be part of the conversation with him and Andy Reid as well, right? Where you got to play above your left tackle here.
It does bring us to the right tackle. Are we breezing past right tackle too fast, Jeff? Like, Eric's made a good point a number of times that Orlando Brown was the second piece put in place, right? Did he come over after? No, he was before. No, it was
after Joe Tooney, because they wanted to sign Trent Williams, right? And
right,
they
they got Tooney, and so they had 1 of 5 spots filled. He became number 2. They got 3 and 4 filled. The right tackle was a collection of people last year, so I don't know that one's been answered yet. Now there's the question again at left tackle, and the question at right tackle hasn't been answered. Is not enough time being spent on that part of the equation, particularly when you consider that left tackle is somewhat unsettled now.
Yeah, I think it is, because that's where the problems arose in the Super Bowl. They lost to Tampa because there were issues on both sides. I think if you're able to stabilize one side of the offensive line, some of these problems with the left tackle become not completely go away, but they become diminished. I mean, you can find a way to scheme it up if you have one part of your offensive line you got to worry about. But Lucas Niang hasn't been able to stay healthy. Andrew Wiley's been serviceable. I mean, he's still sticking around and doing the job, and maybe Derek Kennard, he's unproven. Maybe he can take that spot at some point. But ultimately, yeah, that's a spot to be watching throughout training camp, because it was a spot we were talking about them potentially using a first-round pick on, a couple months ago. We just kind of like forgot about that part of the conversation, but there are some serious questions on that side that have to be resolved as they go through training camp.
Eric, definitely questions, but a lot of options, right? Like you've got, Andrew Wiley, who's done it, started, won playoff games with him starting at right tackle. They've got Kennard, who they obviously like and drafted, that can fit in that equation. Lucas Niang coming back. I mean, they may not have the answer right now, but they've got a lot of cards that could be the one to play.
Yeah, I mean, it's a math, and honestly, that's really funny. Like today, I used some advanced calculus to prove to my interns today that to improve the play of the offensive line, the most effective thing is to improve the weakest player. I think that's intuitive, but it's kind of interesting. The big thing was the Orlando Brown signing, where I'm like, every additional dollar you spend on trying to get your best player to be elite is a waste of money when you could spend that dollar to get your worst player to become average. Yep. And so, again, last year, when you're looking at this chain, you had one strong link and you had 4 weak links, right? And so there were plenty of and the goal was to just get numbers, right? Get numbers. Now, if Andrew Wiley is your only option at right tackle, I don't like it, right? Of course, you don't like it, right? But and if Lucas Niang coming back from patella tendon injury is your only option, that sucks, right? But if you slap an or on these things, they become much better, right? If it's Andrew Wiley or Lucas Niang coming back from injury, or Darian Kennard, a very good SEC tackle, or somebody like Prince Tegawagu, if Orlando Brown comes, if you slap an or on that statement, things get a lot better, because it's really hard to go 0 for 3. It's really easy to go 0 for 1. And I think that's the point that I really like about this approach to the offensive line is at the left tackle spot, you really do have to go 0 for 5 for this thing to completely be a disaster, right? Because you got the thing with Tooney. At the right tackle, you got to go 0 for 3 basically for this thing to be a disaster. And I'm not saying that their first option is going to work. I'm saying that their first 3 options are not going to work.
Right. I want to highlight Zach's question because he's kind of had a couple of points on this. He says shopping the bargain bin for left tackle and left end seemed difficult to sustain. Is there a path to long-term options? And I think it's a good question, but the answer is not today. Right? That's the point of this discussion about where they're going to go and what they're going to do. If you want us to discuss 23, which by the way, we did a 2023 power rankings on the 2D podcast. So check that on some of the past 2D podcasts. We'll look over the horizon. We're not afraid to. The conversation is we're on the eve of training camp, and what are they going to do this year? You're absolutely right, Zach. I mean, no, the Chiefs would love to have found a wrecking crew right defensive end. I think they've got their left defensive end. I think it's George Karlaftis, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. But, I mean, they definitely need more than that. And I think the Chiefs would have loved to have done more on the defensive line. But no team goes in going rock solid, 3 deep at every spot. No problems. Here we go. Everybody has weaknesses, and it's how do you mask those weaknesses and magnify your strengths. And that's what the Chiefs have to do. From the tackle, no, you don't want to be shopping on the bargain bin. And if not Orlando Brown, then who? That's a question I like to ask all the time. If not him, then who? The question is you don't have to answer that because he's going to come in and play. Like he may be a little late. May miss camp, might miss a couple of games, but he's going to come in because he can't really get paid.
Also,
kicking ass.
Also, Chiefs fans, do you really want to give the mega deal to a tackle who is 2 or 3 cheeseburgers away from being too fat to play in the NFL? Like that. This is the other part of this whole thing too. If you don't give Orlando Brown the bag, then I mean, he might as well be. I'm trying to think of White Goodman at the end of Dodgeball. It's like, come on, folks. If he was worthy of the 23 million or whatever, 25 million. Like if you were so desperate for this guy to play left tackle for your team, and you're also at the same exact time concerned that that he needs training camp to survive in this league,
how do you pay?
It's him? Not computing with me, folks.
Yeah, listen. Plan A for me is to Jeff's point. He's not a Chief next year. And to both of your points about they've got a year to answer the question of who's after Orlando Brown, because I don't know. And on the PFF forecast, the podcast, great one that Eric does with George Cheruri, you pointed out that athletically at the combine. Now, granted, he mailed it in. He didn't prep for it, which is another reason.
That's a problem too.
You want to pay a guy who didn't prep? It's the most important time of your football career, and you mailed it in. Like, who thinks he's getting paid and going to play well? Not me, and I'm certainly not going to risk Patrick Mahomes on that. So my goal is to keep the carrot in front of him, have him come out and play great football, nearly Trent Williams football, and then trade him, and then go find somebody else to play left tackle. That's my goal, because even if he plays great football and it's time to pay him, he's earned it, and you got to pay him. I don't want to be the team that pays him because I'm terrified it's time to hit the buffet when you can't cut him for 3 years because you're upside down on him on the cap. So I don't want him to be my left tackle in 2023. I want him to be my left tackle in 22. I want him to play well enough to have trade value. I want to spin him, and I want to find my answer someplace else. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. And again, these are first world problems. Every team that's won a championship in the last 10 to 15 years has faced these same kind of issues. You don't get to have everything you want to have. Hey, it's easy to forget now who Tom Brady was throwing the football to when they were winning their last championship. And it wasn't Randy Moss and Wes Welker and that whole crew. It was guys like Chris Hogan and Danny Amendola, Philip Dorsett. Because you know what? Because they couldn't afford to go out and get better players. Everybody has to do this.
It's math that's so simple you don't need the big Eric Eager brain. No Super Bowl team can retain it. No Super Bowl winner can retain its team.
And those guys generally suck with like Desmond Howard and Larry Brown and the history of football.
But that's my point. Yeah, that's my point. You can't retain your team because they earn more than you're paying them. You have a lot. If you won the Super Bowl, you have a lot of bargains on your team, and they've earned the right to make more. Yeah. But one team can't pay them all what they're worth. So you got to decide who to keep. You got to jettison the ones that aren't the ones to keep, and then find more good guys that will play at $15 million levels while making $1.5 million.
Or
that's
guys,
math.
Like what you said, Petro, like what you said after the 2019 Super Bowl win was, I don't know if it's the best idea to have all 22 guys come back, but not all hungry, right? I mean, these folks have, and I don't mean to look, I'm pro player. Players got to get your money. You have to get your money because this is a rough world, right? And like football is a game. So we're trying to talk about this game that the Chiefs are trying to win, that other teams are trying to win. We're talking about the rules with respect to that. So I never want to like hold up Travis Kelce and say, hey, this guy took less. This is the model citizen. No, you get your money. But with respect to trying to win a Super Bowl and trying to do all these things, like if you want to win on a team that the same team, you want to win multiple Super Bowls, you have two choices, which is one, to do what Travis Kelce did, which is take below market deals all the time, or do what Jamie Collins did, do what Kyle Van Noy did, and go get your money somewhere else, suck ass, and come back and win another Super Bowl. Because like you said, it just can't, it doesn't work this way. Because like somebody got after me on Twitter and said, look, I thought your numbers said Tyreek Hill was worth this much money. And he is. The Chiefs can't pay. The fact is the Chiefs are a great team because they have a number of players who are worth a lot of money. And the league distributes those players to other teams by virtue of the salary cap. That is the point. And instead of deciding to play by these fake rules, which the Chiefs have for years and has gotten them into problems, they decided to play by the real rules and distribute talent to other teams while maintaining the talent that they already have and betting on their ability to backfill that talent.
Let's turn our attention to the wide receiver core. Skyy Moore, the rookie. We know Mecole Hardman should be Mecole Hardman or more as he gets more of the reps that Tyreek Hill got and maybe gets his number called more often. JujuSmith-Schuster, MarquezValdes-Scantling. Skyy Moore, the total wild card because he's played outside the Power 5 and never in the NFL. Plus, there's the question of how much you can get out of a rookie in Andy Reid's system. What's a reasonable expectation for Skyy Moore, Jeff, in your mind?
I'm going to say 35 to 40 catches, about 450 to 550 yardage, probably 4 or 5 touchdowns. I just think you miss a lot of the offseason with a hamstring. You're playing in an offense that traditionally has been hard for rookies to play in and put up big numbers. You have another player in this offense in Mecole Hardman who demands a lot of special trickery to make things happen for him, which I think if he wasn't here, some of that creativity could go to someone like Skyy Moore. So, I think he'll contribute, but I'm not expecting him to walk out there and be Jamar Chase by any stretch of the imagination.
Eric, should we expect him to get a little bit more? I mean, I think the Deebo Samuel, as much as he doesn't want to get it, I think the receivers as running backs as a running threat, even if it's just to show, you got to hand it to him every now and then, but then to freeze linebackers on the backside and to slow down the rush because you show the reverse or the handoff or the receiver coming in motion and lining up in the backfield. Skyy Moore, like one of his calling cards, if you read the PFF.com, draft breakdown, was that he's a tackle breaker. Is that part of what, do we see maybe while he doesn't have the elite speed of Tyreek Hill, but Tyreek Hill's rookie year where they handed him the ball, could be part of what they're getting to and how they get Skyy Moore involved in this?
Well, and we remember at the end of Tyreek Hill's rookie year, Tyreek Hill was the number one wide receiver on the team, right? Like Jeremy Maclin had taken a step back and Chris Conley was never, we never thought Chris Conley was all that great. And by the end of the season, the Denver game, Tyreek Hill's the number one wide receiver, right? To me, and I'm always more optimistic about the team than Jeff. So I think a realistic goal for Skyy Moore is by Thanksgiving to be their number one receiver.
Whoa! I working. Did you hear that right, Soren?
I did hear it. I had the same reaction, but I was going to wait to hear the.
Okay.
I had the same reaction, but I don't think it's. I think the goal. You can set a goal. I've set a goal to be under 200 pounds for the last 15 years. I haven't come close.
I'm trying, by the way.
The goal is there.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
Sorry,
former tight end running around the great suburbs of the Twin Cities in the mornings. When you take a wide receiver in round 2, don't you expect him to be a starter at some point, right? Like by the Juju at 900 yards is a second round pick for the Steelers. You talk about Deebo. Deebo was a legitimate starting, number one option for the 49ers in the passing game as a rookie. And again, this is the power of or. I think the Chiefs would really, really like Skyy Moore to be by Thanksgiving, be their number one receiver. Now, they have an insurance policy of Mecole Hardman, and Mecole Hardman's, by the way, tempering our expectations for Skyy Moore, which I wish he wouldn't, because Skyy Moore is a much, much more accomplished college receiver than Mecole Hardman was. Mecole Hardman, Juju, MarquezValdes-Scantling, and then a few other players, the Josh Gordons, the Cornell Powells, the Justin Ross, although it looks like Ross is already hurt. Like, they buffer it, but I think Skyy Moore very much could be there by the end of Keenan Allen's rookie year. That's like always my comp for Skyy Moore, even though he's a little shorter. By the end of Keenan Allen's rookie year, he was the number one receiver on that team. And I think that's a realistic expectation for Skyy Moore. Do I think it'll happen? I think it's probably a little less than a coin flip, but I think it's a realistic expectation to have.
You said expectation. I would say goal. It's a realistic goal. There's also lots of first-round wide receivers that didn't come close to ever sniffing the 1 or 2 spot in the rotation. So I don't think it's fair to say expectation, unless you think you're Kreskin when it comes to the draft and you're not going to have any misses. But while wide receivers are incredibly important, there's lots of them drafted, there also is a high bust rate. The volatility on wide receivers is still pretty good. And so I would differentiate. I'm fine with what you're saying. I think the goal is for him to be that. Yeah, why not? The Chiefs drafted a guy in the 5th round, Tyreek Hill, who they made into their number 1 wide receiver. Yes, a 3rd round pick, and was Chris Conley, didn't make it. 2nd round pick of Mecole Hardman hasn't ascended there, but that's still your goal. The expectation is different, and I think the expectation is probably where Jeff is. The goal is where Eric is.
Don't let him off the hook now. You got to put some numbers on this, Eric.
Well, hold on one sec. So so here's a question. So Jeff, what did you put for his numbers again?
I said 35 to 40 catches, about 450 to 550 yardage, and 4 or 5 touchdowns.
We got Jeff and I have a bet to make, because as Jeff knows, I like to look at the markets, and I actually I have seen this already before. So where are we here? Player totals on our friends at DraftKings, soon to be friends. Here, let me find Sky 2Ys. All right, Skyy Moore's betting market total for receiving yards in 2022, 680.5 is where the DraftKings.
That's the over-under.
That's the over-under on DraftKings. So which, I think is a fair number. But
I think it's a fair number, but I think if I read that number and I'm Valdes-Scantling, I'm Juju, or I'm Mecole Hardman, I'm like, what am I over here? Right? It's clearly an indictment of the other 3, is it not?
Yeah, I think neither one of those guys, the Chiefs receiving core, which I like as a fan, is being slept on this year. Neither one of those 2 guys are in that mix. Travis Kelce's number is 1,100 yards. At his over-under, which is low for him.
That seems low. That seems super low for him.
So, and usually these numbers are low. I think most, recreational bettors bet a ton of overs, and then, a lot of, sharp bettors will say something like, well, guys can get hurt, and, this, that, guys can
I think if you across the board, do you have all the other Chiefs numbers?
Yeah, I'm curious now.
No, they're not. So what I'm saying is they didn't
Okay.
The other Chiefs receivers are not notable enough to have a price here on this.
Well, or they can't get their arms around what they are enough to put one that they don't think they're exposed. Like Juju's injury history, what number do you put? When he was healthy with the Steelers and played, he went to 1,400. Then he gets hurt all the time. Where the hell do you post that at 700? All that is a bet on whether or not he'll get hurt.
He'll get hurt.
Right? That's why they won't post that there. Same thing with Valdes-Scantling. I think there's not enough of and there's not a known commodity as to what he can be. Is he going to
he's a complete unknown in this offense, right? Because in Green Bay's offense, he never really earned the trust of Aaron Rodgers. And in the year he did, he was pretty great, right?
But let me ask you this: if I threw 680 at you, right? That's the number on Skyy Moore, right? If
I would take under.
Okay, if I threw 680,
but I would bet Jeff. What if we put the number at 500 and me and Jeff took opposite sides? Would that seem reasonable? 500.
So you're going to 501.
Jeff, if
Yes,
you,
I'll take 501 or 501 or better.
because
What's
Jeff's
that?
not the gambler, and I'm not the gambler that Eric Eager is, but as your consigliere here, let me advise you: if you take under on a number that's 180 yards lower than you can get on the market, I will slap you myself. You tell
He's
him
trying to play me, huh?
if he wants to play this game, play the posted number.
He's trying to hustle me.
I'll take over then. I said the outlandish thing.
Okay.
So I think Skyy Moore gets 681 yards or more.
So
Yeah,
let's do some quick math here. Eric's the math guy here. If Mahomes say he throws for 4,500 yards, let's assume Kelsey gets 1,300 of that, right? So now we're down to 3,200 yards. The running backs get 500 to 700 of that, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
All the guys combined. So now that's 2,100 yards. Now we're down to what? What is that? About 2,400 yards left to distribute amongst four wide receivers.
I think that this is where maybe we're missing it here, though. So the Chiefs' schedule, and Soren always laughs at it. The Chiefs' schedule is a point harder per game than any other team on a neutral field. So Patrick Mahomes had 4,800 yards last year. The yards that anybody else that plays into his stead will also count for receivers. So I would actually put that number more like at 5,000. Like if I was putting this together, I'd put it at 5,000.
I would too, because the harder schedule
means they're throwing more.
Trail more, which means you'll have to throw more.
Yeah. It's not that they're facing harder defenses. It means that their games are going to be more up and down. They're not going to be 19-9 games against Dallas. So I think at 5,000, you put, as you said, Jeff, like let's say Kelsey and the back, like tight ends and running backs combined for 2,000 of those yards, let's say. So then now you're putting 3,000 yards between all the wide receivers. Hardman to me is the wild card. If you think Mecole Hardman is going to have a year like last year, where I believe it was actually a fairly decent amount of yards for Mecole Hardman.
700.
He had 700 yards last year. So then that's a fourth of of that basically.
Well, let me ask my question.
So basically, they're all, if you evenly distributed, it's all at about 700 yards, which is kind of where Skyy Moore is now.
Yeah, that's the question I was going to ask you before you tried to hustle Jeff. Is if I gave you 680 on all four receivers, who would you take over and who would you take under on? Let's make 680 because I think that's a fair number for all four of them.
Yeah, I would go under Juju, over MVS.
Under Juju?
Oh,
injuries.
What evidence do we have that Juju can play a whole season? Like
it's not based upon whether or not only counts
so you're
if he plays 17.
Okay.
So
yeah. Like
that's a
different
factor.
It is tricky, Jeff, because if they don't, it is tricky because if you make the bet and let's say they get hurt in training camp, the bet's void. But the moment he plays a game, then it doesn't matter if he plays one game or 17. So like that's kind of the tricky thing of the bet. I love when Petro just if you'd smash that like button, the love button, the subscribe button if you're catching us right now. So I think MVS and MVS and Skyy Moore go over. I think Hardman and Juju for reasons that I think are contractually based. I think the Chiefs have an incentive to gas up Skyy Moore and MVS, and they have an incentive to diminish Juju and Mecole Hardman.
Wow, they're conspiratorial.
Those guys are due for paydays, right?
It's like a Tyreek Hill. This Tyreek Hill thinking right here.
They're trying to win games. I don't think you can be like, but don't throw it to this guy. I don't think that.
I'm not saying don't throw it to this guy. I'm just saying don't go out of your way to make Mecole Hardman a thing if he's not a thing.
Right. No, I agree.
And
with
that last year they went out of their way to make Mecole Hardman a thing at times last year, right? Yeah. And I don't think that they have to do that this year.
A couple of things. One, Chris says, why aren't you considering Kelsey getting hurt? He's on the wrong side of 30.
Sure.
Fair point. He's way into borrowed territory. No one had ever had more than 3 straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons as a tight end. It was him and Greg Olsen. He's had 6 now, right? 6 consecutive.
6 in a row.
So he is on borrowed time based upon history, but it's also like no one had ever played good football at age like 36 and a quarterback till Peyton Manning blew it up and threw for 5,500 at age like 37 or 8. So, there's also this guy though is rewriting how it works. And so that's a reason to bet on Travis Kelce. And then there's this one, which stopped everybody in their tracks there for a moment. Again, if you're catching us on the podcast, on the stream, you can see this as you're part of the chat room. Jeff, you mind dropping Eric some tips on how to light and make a visually appealing background? Eric looks like he's posted up in his grandpa's place using it as an manufactured light bulb.
That's exactly what he's doing, right?
It really is. It is what he's doing. Hey, the man is on the road and has been on the road for quite some time, and he's not missed a show. Let's not get on the guy's back. Like, come on now, people. Let's celebrate that he made it happen. What I love is, like, if you didn't catch the beginning of the show, he's not even sure where the mic is, right? He's got a mic that's like you can see on camera, but that's not actually what is bringing the sound in. So I think that's fantastic as well. That's a cute part of it. All right, we got some defensive stuff, but we've gone for an hour 5 now, so we'll save that. We got a lot more to come with the training camps coming up. We got another vacation I got to get in, and then we'll be back pounding both our podcasts each week. So we'll have the Two Deep. If you haven't caught that, that's our NFL-based podcast. Look for that. Subscribe to it. Download it. Tell your friends. Like it. Love it. It don't cost nothing. But it helps us out, and of course, here on Red, Gold, and Bold. We always appreciate everybody listening, all your comments. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. For Jeff Chadiha from NFL Network, NFL.com, Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus, PFF.com for his work. You can catch my work at 810WHB.com. My name is Soren Petro. Thanks for joining us here on Red, Gold, and Bold.